My name's Serena for those of you that are new here, and today we're doing another deep dive into one of the Pretty Little Lies. Today we're talking about Hanna Marin. I've already done video essays about Emily and Aria, and I'm going to have one out about Spencer soon, which is really exciting, but today we're talking about Hanna. So Hanna was one of Alison's friends in the clique, and Alison definitely picked on her the most. Alison was popular and beautiful, told her she was overweight and she needed to lose weight, and made Hanna feel really bad about her body. She pushed Hanna into getting an eating disorder, which was obviously really detrimental to her mental health and her body image. And Hanna's parents separated because her dad cheated on her mom and left the family to go and be with a new family, basically. But then after Alison's disappearance, Hanna kind of had a glow up. Mona took her in, Hanna lost weight, she started dressing really fancy and became the new queen bee of the school. And she needed a lot of help with her mental health and dealing with her wounded inner child. She had a lot of problems, which I think so many of us connected to because we felt bad for her. The girls, especially Spencer, often underestimated her. This was at the period of the show when I really liked Hanna as well, so I was like, don't come for my girl Hanna, okay? Leave her alone, because I was such a Hanna fan. Even in season 7, after Hanna accidentally kills Archer, she didn't do it on purpose. Spencer's like, ugh, Hanna can't tell her left pedal from her right pedal, as if Hanna wanted this to happen. Or like in season 1, Hannah's trying to protect her mum from going to jail, so she ends up kind of throwing Aria under the bus under A's instructions and almost exposing Aria's relationship with Ezra to Aria's parents. Hanna didn't want to do it, but she valued her mum. But then, because she felt bad, she backed out at the last minute. Aria was so annoyed at her without actually listening to why Hanna would do that or what was going on with Hannah's mum, because if Aria had just listened to her rather than being just mad, she would have found out that actually Hannah's mum was in a really serious position, and anyone in Hannah's place, I'm sure, would have done the exact same thing, even though, yeah, it wasn't the best thing to do. And regularly the girls will share their disagreements on a certain topic or their agreements on a certain topic, and they'll have the same collective mindset about it, but often Hannah's the one who says something different and challenges that viewpoint, and the girls are often in this group against her, saying, no, we disagree, and often they don't really listen properly to Hannah's opinions. The rest of the time they were totally fine as friends, but there were just little hints there. I will say it is so true and accurate for Hanna to dress up as Marilyn Monroe on the Halloween train, because Marilyn was so beautiful and flirty and fun, but everyone only saw that, and they missed that underneath there was actually an incredibly wise and intelligent young woman. Obviously, because you can tell by the title of this video, I want to talk about what changed with Hanna's character and how she regressed and became less likable, unfortunately. Hanna is one of the most underutilized and underused characters in the show. She could have had this huge character arc, and she kind of has one, but it falls short. One of my viewers, Sam, said the PLLs described in 5 words or less. Emily, discarded and ignored. Aria, wasted potential. Hanna, underutilized. Spencer, all payoff, no setup. Alison, all setup, no payoff. And when I read that, I was like, why is that so true? With Alison, she's established as all roads lead back to Alison. She's this mysterious figure, but then the final part of the show doesn't really have anything to do with her, and the AD reveal is so disconnected from her. It's really odd. It's like the first few seasons and the last few seasons are 2 separate shows, right? And then with Spencer, it's like there's not really a setup there, and then suddenly she ends up playing the biggest role in the whole show. And then with Hanna, it's like she has all these cool things you could do with her, but they're not really taken far enough. And then with Aria, obviously she should have been A, and she wasn't, so that's just a waste of potential, or at least there was some big secret with her or something about her that wasn't adding up. So I thought that was such a good comment. So you empathize with Hanna when you see the way her dad treats her and disregards her. He honestly favors his new daughter over Hanna, and he only really steps in to talk to Hanna when she's in trouble or she needs something, but he's not actually there for her in her day-to-day life at all. And he genuinely has no clue what he wants. Like, one minute he's moving on with his new life, and the next minute he's kind of crawling back to Hanna's mum, but then he changes his mind and realizes he doesn't want it, and he's just a child. He's not ready to be a dad. Ashley is a much better parent because you can see how much she genuinely loves her daughter, but at times she's not the best with setting boundaries with Hanna. It's like Hanna wants to make decisions for her mum, and her mum has to remind her, honey, I'm the adult in this situation, not you. And it's never easy as a single mother though, so I don't even blame her for having struggles with this. In season 1, Ashley stole money, and then Hanna got involved when the money gets stolen. Ashley's annoyed at Hanna, like, oh my god, I can't believe you let the money get stolen. Ashley was the one who stole the money in the first place, so those were some shaky mistakes in her parenting. But other than that, she is a really genuinely caring mum and will do anything for her daughter. And now let's just briefly talk about what I like and dislike about Hanna. So Ashley Benson fits the role perfectly. I could not imagine anyone else playing Hanna. I really like Hanna's spunk and her sense of humor, her comedic value. I love her relationship with her mum. I also respect that even though it got annoying sometimes, she was so blunt and opinionated and just said it like it is. She wears her heart on her sleeve and you have to respect it. Like in season 6, right? Allison knows the girls have been kidnapped by Charles, who's actually Cece, and Allison's talking about how Cece was such a good sibling, as if she knew Cece really well, when actually they only knew each other for like one birthday party. But Allison had the nerve to be sat there like, how is that person a murderer or a bad person? I really vibed with that person, even though obviously when you're a child and you're an adult you can change so much. So there's no reason for Allison to be justifying the actions of Cece, especially to the girls that Cece kidnapped. And I get where Allison's coming from in the sense that she has this sibling she didn't know about and she's grieving it, and it must suck as well. But it was really insensitive, I think, to be saying that to the liars. She could be talking to her dad about it or to someone else, but saying it to the victims of Cece is a pretty tacky move. But none of the girls seem to be calling her out in it. They're all like, oh yeah, fair enough. Hanna is way too reactive and nasty with how she calls Allison out about this, simply because I think Allison and Hanna were both wrong in that situation, because they were both being very insensitive towards the other's feelings. But Hanna has a point, and the other girls are not saying what they actually feel, which is pretty cowardly. They're just going along with what Allison wants, and Hannah's the one to say, no, I'm not going to sit here and cry over Cece, who's done so many awful things to us. But the girls are still taking Allison's side and shutting Hanna down, even though they probably agree with her and know she's right, but they're taking Allison's side over Hanna's. So those are the kinds of times where I do respect Hanna, because I like that she's being open about her feelings. But in terms of the things I dislike about her, she's really impulsive, and at first I didn't mind because I was like, well, everyone has a weakness, it's good character crafting. But after a while it feels like she's the one doing the stupid stuff to make the plot move forward. She's the one to destroy evidence or throw something in the blender. She finds a stolen gun and takes it to this frat party thinking she's going to bury it, and the whole thing was so badly thought out. And at one point she wants to confess to killing Wilden, and she's jumping to conclusions that Noel Khan is AD even when he's clearly not. And later she kidnaps Noel. And actually, in general, to be fair, the girls can be impulsive, all of them. Like with them choosing to cover up Archer's murder even though it was clearly an accident, because now they're going to go to jail for a whole bunch of other crimes if someone does find out, because it will be a hit and run, tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice. Whereas if they were just open, like, hey, we accidentally hit this guy with our car because he ran in front of it, you're going to get a way less harsh punishment. This will be yet another secret that A can blackmail them with. From season 1 to around 3, I was fully on board with Hannah's character, but when I did start to dislike her is around season 5 onwards, and I'll talk about that later, the downward spiral of Hannah's character. But now I quickly want to talk about why she's underutilized and where it falls short, where it's not taken far enough or developed or elaborated on. So in the first 2 seasons, you see how damaged Hanna is in a way that makes sense, right? Her dad treats her so bad and neglects her. Her mum can only give Hanna so much attention, you know, and it's pretty lonely, just you and your mum, so you feel bad for her. In season 5, her dad's still treating her terribly. She still seems to be in this dark headspace of feeling like she's never good enough, and I was hoping by season 5 you'd start to see this big shift and this character arc and development happening with Hanna, because what I really wanted to see with her is her start starting out as this insecure, shy girl and becoming the most confident girl in the whole show. But that never really happens. Like in season 1, you could see how desperately she wants her parents to stay together. She's getting so involved, like, please tell me you're getting back together. And later on, she's hoping her mum will work things out with Ted, and she's really holding on to that. And that's actually one of the things she connects to Caleb about, is this whole broken family scenario of feeling like they're never good enough and their parents don't want them. She therefore has serious abandonment issues. If someone walks out on her, it's gonna affect her 10 times harder, because it's like this wounded part of her childhood. So when Caleb walks out on her in season 4, or Mona stabs her in the back, that's going to hurt Hanna 10 times harder. I mean, it's kind of implied, it's inferred Hanna has abandonment issues. You can sort of pick that up from her interactions with Caleb. But in later seasons, it's not really fully going there in terms of how Hanna is getting past these abandonment issues. So it's like some slightly shaky character development. And even earlier in like season 5 with Zach, that was a really traumatic experience. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a huge turning point for Hanna. I mean, this guy has been harassing her and being super creepy, but instead her shock over it only lasts for like a few episodes, and then she moves on without it really affecting her long term. Subtly with Holbrook too, because she'd kissed him once, and that was obviously completely inappropriate, and she knew it. She was like, oh, never mind. But then later, she's starting to realize he's not a very nice guy. She knows he kissed Allison, which is obviously disgusting. And that's a real issue on the show, is these older people having relationships with people who are way too young for them and who are underage. He's talking to her by the car, and it's getting quite heated. And then he makes this flirtatious comment, so she hits him with a crowbar or something. It's like those events were just chucked in for shock value. What was the point of them? As odd as they were, because they weren't fully developed or expanded, it does make Hanna a very likable and sympathetic character. You root for her, you feel bad when this stuff is happening to her. But then, because I went on a rant on this in my Everything Wrong with PLL video, I went on a whole rant about why I didn't like Hanna, and I had a few comments saying, come on, be nice to her, she doesn't deserve it. But no, I am fully confident in why I'm judging her character in the later seasons, and it's not really a fault of her own. I think it's the writing and maybe the directing too, like, yo, your lines, it will be cute, but it's not cute. So now I want to talk about the downfall of Hanna Marin. This was, what can I say? It was so bad. It was so tragic. Like, dude, she could have been so good. It's such a freaking shame. She could have been such a good character and really evolved. And by the end, I could have said, yeah, she's in like my top 10 favorite characters in the show. But honey, what happened? Like, she just regressed so bad. And it all starts in season 5, and it only gets worse from there. In season 5, she starts to become snappy and irritable and just has a very negative, sulky presence on screen. And I thought it would get better and she'd pick back up again and go back to her chirpy self, but she just doesn't. In season 5, the pageant lady says she isn't pageant material, but Emily is. And obviously, it's not Emily's fault that the woman didn't like Hanna, because no offense to Hanna, but Hanna was coming across as super weird. She was having some sort of mental breakdown or something, understandably, but all the woman sees is Hanna seeming like she's really not ready for this opportunity. She's not grounded. She'll be all over the place. You can't rely on her. So why would you invest in someone like that? They're not stable. I respect that. But Hannah's reaction is she doesn't see how she really messed up in that situation, how it was her fault. And she's angry at Emily. She literally gets in the car and drives off. Did they go together in the same car? Maybe Emily brought her own car, I'm not sure, but it was really rude because Emily was rushing out trying to talk to Hanna like, oh my god, what happened? That was so bad. And Hannah's just leaving her, acting as if Emily is to blame for this, when in fact, unfortunately, Hanna was the one to screw up that situation. And in fact, I think Emily would have been happy to do the pageant and do something really good with that money, maybe even give it to Hanna. So there was no reason for Hanna to flip out at her like that. It's such a problem for Hannah's character to go downhill like this. If it was Spencer, let's say, or Aria, I'd be like, well, it's annoying, sure, but it's not really a problem. But it is a problem with Hanna because it undermines her whole character development setup we've got going on in the earlier seasons, because in the earlier seasons, you know it's going to go somewhere. What I was hoping would happen is she'd be getting more confident, you'd see her feeling really good in her body, standing up to Allison, And instead, it's like nothing really happens with that. Like she's just becoming more and more grumpy and rousy rather than confident and fun and empowered and wise. I would have hoped that by, season 5, we'd be seeing a really big shift in terms of Hanna's confidence or something happening. But she's actually worse in season 5. And actually, even when she's doing her dance for the pageant lady, she's having these very vivid flashbacks of Kate, her stepsister, in her mind, and it's making her so angry. I realized, wow, she really hasn't taken many steps forward at all. She still feels overlooked, unrecognized, unappreciated, overshone. For me, I was like, this is so awful, this is so tragic. But yet, with the music and with Hanna's completely ridiculous over-the-top dance moves and the whole thing, and the close-ups of her face breaking the fourth wall, staring into the camera, I couldn't tell whether we were supposed to laugh at her or feel bad for her, because I got the impression we as an audience were supposed to be taking the piss out of her or thinking it was funny. And around the same time, Alison is returning. Hanna really hits a bump in the road, which I get, that is realistic, because if your long-term nemesis is returning, that's not right, frenemy is returning, you're going to be like, oh my god, it's going to bring back so many traumatic memories, and you're going to be like, okay, well, now she's back. Is there a place left for me at the table? Where do I fit in? Like, how will I be able to play a role in this friendship if she's back and she's taking my place? I'm just going to be in her shadow again like I was before. All of this internal conflict, which I like, I think that's good. When Alison comes back, I was getting the impression she was realizing how bad Alison had treated her. Like, oh my god, Alison really pushed me into my ED, and I wanted more one-on-one conversations with the two of them together, and Hanna being like, you pushed me into this terrible place about my body, you did this, you did that. And for there to be a really big role reversal and shift in their relationship, and for it to be really complicated and deep, but it never really goes there. And I wanted more details on why the hell Alison even wanted Hanna in her clique in the first place, because clearly Alison didn't think Hanna was pretty or worthy, so why the hell was she even letting her hang around? And Hanna goes through this emo phase when Alison returns. She dyes her hair, she wears heavy makeup, she starts drinking, she starts being super negative. Everyone says, oh, she pulled out of it, but does she? Because she returns to her original style and fashion, but in terms of her personality, she keeps being annoyed and irritable permanently, rather than returning to the sensitive, fun, chirpy girl. Her alcohol dependency was really bad, and her friends do not handle it well. They act as if she's doing something wrong, in the sense that they should be annoyed at her and making these bitter, snappy comments like, get a grip, Hanna, rather than stepping in and having an intervention and seeming worried for her. They don't seem to understand at all how serious Hanna's situation is and her mental health. They're just being such horrendous friends. And Hanna shows up hungover for school at one point. She's at a dinner party with Emily and Pam, drinking, and she recovers by simply stopping and moving on. Whereas normally when you start getting into a habit of doing that, it's really hard to just stop. Although she puts the bottle down, her personality of being kind of snappy and grumpy is still there. And this is something you might only notice if you actually rewatch the show, because I kind of registered it a little bit when I first watched it, but it wasn't until my rewatch I really noticed it. You can show that a character is stressed out or anxious without her snapping every single line or shouting them. Sam said sometimes she's an alcoholic on a self-destructive bend to cope with her problems. Other times Hanna has liquid courage and can stand up to anything. It's not handled in a nuanced way, like she has multiple sides. Hanna mostly exists to serve any role required because the other liars are so set in expectations. We can't have Spencer or Aria say this really dumb thing, but the dumb thing is snarky, so Emily can't say it. Guess it should be Hanna. Exactly. She's all over the place. One minute she's having this serious alcohol issue, the next she's being like a strong, confident badass, and the next she's being grumpy. By the 7th season, we've had a 5-year time jump. I was hoping I'd see some really noticeable, explicit and well explained steps forward in terms of Hanna's Hanna's self-growth and self-love and confidence in her body and not having a drinking problem anymore. Because in the first season, she was really insecure and shy. She didn't say much. She kind of kept her head down. She doubted herself 24/7. And I was hoping when she was older, it would be like, wow, she's so amazing. But instead, she does change and evolve, but not in a good way. Instead of coming across as confident and badass and independent, she's just being rude to even her friends who haven't done anything wrong and are in the same boat she's in. She's not a badass. She's just snapping at people constantly and rousing at them. She's disrespecting her friends. She's raising her voice. She's just incredibly unlikable. And maybe the writers aren't clear on how to write a girl who's strong and fearless and fun and sensitive all at the same time. So they thought in order to create a strong female character, she needed to be stone cold and just kind of rude and insensitive, because it comes across that way. What makes it bad isn't that she's doing it, because all the girls do stupid stuff on the show or rouse at people or go through a hard time. The problem is that it's so unclear as to why she's actually doing it, and it's not actually addressed with or dealt with properly or handled properly. She doesn't kind of by the final episode start stopping doing that. She's still doing it. I know there are lots of possible explanations, like she's really stressed, she's overwhelmed, the kidnapping situation really destroyed her. But like, why? Because I know it's cool to have subtlety and let the audience figure stuff out for themselves, but there is a point where you need to address stuff. You can't just let it slide. In season 7, Driving Miss Crazy, a detective turns up at the loft and he informs Hanna about an incident at the Radley, a flood, and he says a witness saw her and Caleb at the scene, which stresses Hanna out. And I get it, because she's digging herself into a hole, she's worried about getting caught, and Hanna really spirals with this new piece of potential evidence. So Emily and Spencer are trying to calm her down, like, okay, this is not going to be productive if we're just ranting. We need to be thinking rationally in order to find a solution, right? Emily tells her to breathe, calm down, and Hannah's like, no, you breathe. Hanna questions Aria, why haven't you had a turn yet? And what's so dumb about that is no girl at that point knew that Aria was on the A team. So all they know is for some reason Aria hasn't been given another turn on the game. Not Aria's fault, right? So I thought it was so rude and disrespectful for Hanna to be snapping at her. It actually makes me so sad when people try and justify or explain these behaviors. Like when people say, oh no, Serena, you misunderstand. And they give me 3 paragraphs of all the potential psychoanalytical reasons as to why Hanna may be behaving the way she is, trying to draw together all these clues from the most subtle and not obvious of things and say, here, this is why she's being the way she is. Because we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to take all those steps. That's the writer's job to do that. And we're compensating for their lack of effort to explain it. In the beginning, she's befriending people outside of the clique like Lucas and Caleb and Mona, and it's really cool because the other girls aren't doing it so much, so you're seeing her taking that step forward. What made her so adorable was her standing by Lucas, but then she loses that empathy she had in season 1 that made her so fun and likable. Part of the downfall of her character is she's got this job working in fashion, but somehow it doesn't really feel that impressive or like, wow, she finally made it and she finally did something she always was trying so hard to do, you know? It doesn't feel that satisfying. You don't really see her investing in fashion. She wears nice high-end clothes, but she's not actually seeming that into fashion. Like, you don't see her sketching clothes or anything. You don't see her sewing or designing and hanging up her own stuff. You don't see her reading books about the subject or going to online courses about it, which is another reason I think why it's really hard to be all happy and excited for her when she gets this super cool job, because we never really were taught to care about it earlier on. And now I just want to talk about her relationships. And this is another thing that made her character a little bit worse in the later seasons, because in the earlier seasons, her relationships are really good and interesting. But by the final season, her relationship with Caleb is the worst it's ever been. Their relationship just isn't as good. It's a little bit boring. It's kind of flaked out. So let's start with Sean. He was her first boyfriend and he was fine. And I get Hannah's mentality around her body making her feel so bad when Sean doesn't want to sleep with her, because she'd be thinking, am I doing something wrong? Am I not attractive enough? It's taken way too far. She's having literal hissy fits and complaints and not respecting his boundaries and his morals at all. And you know what? If it's not working, break up, don't pressure him. And it's just lame, it's harassment. Like, stop pressurizing him if that's not what he wants, because there's a real wider conversation that needs to be had here around consent. If it's not a definite 100% enthusiastic yes, then it's a no. They don't want to do it. You can't do it unless you're 100% sure. The person needs to want to do it. You need to know they're not going to regret doing it in the future. And with Sean, it definitely wasn't like that. I will say though, separate note, but he was such a douche for flirting with Aria at the homecoming dance and sending her flowers afterwards. Now let's talk about Caleb. Initially, her and Caleb are an opposites attract kind of relationship. Two people you never think would be together, but actually really work well together. They have this snarky banter back and forth. They're from completely different worlds. They're the best couple on the show in my opinion, because they're the most consistent. And I thought it was so sweet how at the beginning she starts giving Caleb a chance and warming up to him, letting him stay in her house. And even though he's dodgy and sketchy, she's like, no, he's a good guy. I see something good in him. And then when he stabs her in the back, it makes it all the more heartbreaking. There's a cool role reversal after the betrayal where Hannah's like, I want nothing to do with that boy. And her mum's like, I don't know, he made a mistake, but he's not that bad. Him and Hanna weren't in a relationship when he started doing stuff for Jenna. Also afterwards, he felt terrible about it, and Hanna really put her foot down. She set her boundaries, didn't want anything to do with him. She didn't get back together with him for ages, so I don't mind because of that, because she really was like, nope, you were using me, I'm not doing it. Caleb's initially introduced as this tough, street smart bad boy, which I really like, because then you see he actually has a sensitive and vulnerable, nurturing side where he's not all cool with his guard up. I really like him as this like protective, sweet boyfriend, but he almost goes a little bit too far with that, in the sense that I liked him the most in like season 1 and 2, and in the later seasons he loses a little bit of that spark. I mean, not majorly, but a bit. He's a bit more boring than he was in season 1, because in season 1 I liked the contrast of seeing him being like all witty and snarky but also vulnerable, but he kind of becomes the stereotype of the protective boyfriend in the later seasons, just a little bit. It's not major, but it is there. I was angry at him too for leaving her to go to Ravenswood, even though he probably was trying to protect her and he genuinely wanted to go to Ravenswood. That whole breakup scene was handled so badly. They were going so strong, it honestly made zero sense because they seemed so happy together. Clearly the writers just setting them up for the Ravenswood spin-off. Camilla said, I don't have much evidence for this, especially because I haven't watched the series for a long while, but I feel like Hanna would actively choose Caleb over the girls. There are little things there. One thing she said that goes with this was, you win, you can have us as your precious dolls, but if you do anything to hurt Caleb, I will kill you. And I've never seen anyone talk about it, but it really pisses me off. Like, why are you saying you can have us? She's sort of like handing in herself and her friends to A so that Caleb won't be hurt or kidnapped as well. I can't explain it, but at least the way she words it comes off so wrong. I agree. I remember when she said that, I was like, you're really thinking about Caleb now? It's probably not even how she actually feels, so why say that? And even in like, I think season 2, the girls are investigating A and they want Caleb's help, but Hannah's like, no, Hanna, this isn't just about you. Your friends clearly want his help and they want to get out of this A situation. They want to find out who's hurting them. If they think Caleb can help them get to the end of this, then who are you to get in their way, you know? But Hannah's reasoning was that she didn't want Caleb to get hurt. I really like Caleb's protectiveness as a boyfriend, but at points it was like he was undermining and not appreciating her own ability to stand up for herself. It's like, I'll go off in this scheme by myself to go and investigate this. It's like, no. So I get why Hanna would feel like he's smothering her and he's too much, but when I didn't like the way she was responding to it was around the dollhouse, simply because she got out, she'd been kidnapped, the kidnapper's on the loose, so of course he's going to be so scared for her, but she was being so rude and so ungrateful for the fact that he's being kind and sensitive and he wants her to be okay, because he was saying, right, I need to go check on the cop cars outside, make sure they're actually supervising properly and keeping an eye on her. He wanted a tracking device in her car or something, and she was so mad about all this stuff. But I think that's a great idea. Like, why do you have a problem with that? I think he's got the right to be protective in this situation. But when she first returned after the dollhouse, I know she's traumatized, so I'm going to be gentle on her because of that, but she was treating him so bad, and when he reaches out with the kindness, she doesn't respond to it well. And depressingly enough, the only time she actually seemed to actually kiss him and be intimate with him and respond really well
was when he approached her with aggression and force.
He like walked into the room and grabbed her and kissed her like, you need to kiss me or something. And it was just like, really? That's when you're finally going to like kiss him back and be excited he's there, when he has to literally storm into the room and get angry at you, but you're not responding well when he's showing you compassion. And that's weird. I noticed that when I first watched it, and I was like, oh, okay. The whole love triangle as well really dimmed their relationship, and by the end of season 7 they're getting married, and I'm like, I don't really care. Also because they're fighting, even in the season finale, Hannah's making these snarky comments to Caleb like, we never got to have a honeymoon. It's very negative, so it was hard to get behind their relationship at that point. It was fine, it was never bad, but it wasn't great. So now let's talk about Travis. He was a short-term boyfriend of Hannah's, and he was honestly completely pointless. I don't know why he was part of the storyline, especially because he's not there in later seasons, even though he's a nice guy. Like, he was fine, but the relationship was very bland, and also she'd just separated from Caleb, so I don't know why she couldn't have just stayed single. It's a real problem. As soon as Caleb leaves, a really handsome, fun, interesting guy comes along to take Caleb's place, which is not only super unrealistic, but it would have been nice to see the girls stay single more often, and a lot of you guys were saying that. One of you commented that on one of my videos on the show, and it got like 800 thumbs up. Let's talk about Ren. Now, what I don't mind about her interactions with Ren is the fact that they made sense. She's visiting Mona in Radley, and Ren works at Radley, so actually it would be weirder if they didn't see each other. So I was fine with that, and I was fine with a friendship. What was the point of this flirtation? She kisses him once and then he pursues her and she's like, oh no, I can't, and he just leaves. It was a waste of her time, it was a waste of my time, and Ren was super creepy in that situation, because with Spencer you could say, oh, it was a one-off, but it's clearly not a one-off when he's also pursuing Hanna, who's Spencer's friend. Both of them are way too young for him. He's like a grown man in a job, and they're teenagers and are underage, and it's really messed up. I love the actor who plays Ren, so he manages to make Ren likable, but the actual character of Ren is not likable. And you know what? No wonder the girls were so supportive of Aria and Ezra being together, because they were out there having these wildly inappropriate relationships themselves. And although Ren and Hanna had a lot of chemistry, so what? It doesn't make up for how gross the relationship is. Now let's talk about Jordan. Jordan was such a dull love interest for Hanna. He's like her fiance who's introduced in around season 6B. Honestly, I'm surprised her and Caleb weren't together after the time jump, because they were going so strong. The problem with Jordan isn't that he's there, it's that he's so boring and lifeless. And you know, I wouldn't have minded if her love interest was someone like Travis we'd seen before, because at least that would be like, oh okay, well, we know this person, they're not a stranger. But with Jordan, he's just this random guy, so it's really hard to get attached to him. He deserved way better too. Hanna cheats on him. She has no respect for their relationship or trying to fight to hold on to him. It's like she doesn't care about him. And she was clearly head over heels for Caleb the minute she sees him again, which made it even weirder. There's this scene where Hanna puts on a slinky red dress and tries to seduce Jordan and be all sexy and stuff. And the funniest part is, I thought that scene was funny, but she's taking herself so seriously. She's like, ta-da. She sits on his lap and she's all like, hey baby, and she's got her boobs out. She looks beautiful. She's done her hair, she's done her makeup, and she's trying so hard. She's pulling out all the stops, being super cute. His lack of reaction to that was actually depressing. It's like, oh, what's going on here? Dude, are you actually stupid? It was just so bad. The lack of chemistry was really evident in that scene. But then they go on this date, I guess, to somewhere they've been before. There's this construction site because the place has been knocked down, which really isn't that big a deal. It happens. But Hanna starts freaking out. I kind of get what they were trying to do there. You know, when you're having a really bad day and you're really stressed about something, and then you smash a glass and it's really not that big a deal, but you just start crying and getting so angry. I think that's what they were trying to do with this scene, but it just makes Hanna come across as so irrational, and it was just a really terribly executed scene. Hanna sees that the place has been knocked down and she starts freaking out, going, oh my god, this is so terrible. And she's basically saying, this restaurant thing isn't here, so our relationship isn't going to work out, and what are we going to do? And she takes off her ring and hands it back to him. It went from like, oh, that's strange, the place got knocked down, to, oh my god, I can't do it, here's your ring back. The scene escalated so much for no reason. I've got a whole section on this because it was that damaging and that terrible. I think it deserves a whole section. So we're going to talk about the love triangle now between Caleb and Spencer and Hanna. It was trash. The show never did shit like that in the earlier seasons, so it feels so out of place and forced. Just a series of unfortunate events, really, because it made every single party involved look bad, which is shocking. You know, normally in situations there's a clear bad guy and a good guy. With this, no. I don't like Spencer and Caleb's relationship, even though the actors have some chemistry and some really cute conversations and fun moments. They were often just making out, which made it seem like their whole relationship was just based on the physical rather than the emotional. It's odd because then Spencer suddenly says, I love you, way too early on, and Spencer is not the kind of girl to do that. Spencer obviously felt like she'd lost the fight in a sense, like fine, Hanna wins, Hanna gets Caleb, but she's behaving like this scorned lover, and she's this clingy, sad, jealous ex-girlfriend, and I really wanted to see her go down with a fight and be like, whatever then, I don't care, but instead she's like groveling to get Caleb back. You barely had any flashbacks between Spencer and Caleb, or earlier seasons maybe, where they were crushing on each other, so it feels completely out of the blue, out of left field. You hear about how, in a total coincidence, star-crossed lovers, they just bumped into each other while on holiday, and it's so romantic, but it's not actually on screen, so it's really hard to buy it and it's hard to get invested. Obviously, dating an ex is always a really risky and dodgy move, and Spencer should have known that, and she's done it too many times where she dates her sister's boyfriend. Or Hanna and Caleb ended really badly. They didn't have any closure. Destiny Joseph said, I never felt like the writers were playing favorites more blatantly than when they had Spencer date Caleb and Hanna was just supposed to take it. Caleb felt like it came out of nowhere just to spite Hanna. As much as Hanna annoyed me, she was put through so much unnecessary struggle, but to be fair, Spencer went to Hanna and said, hey, is it okay if I date Caleb? And Hanna said yes. And then when she decides she wants Caleb back, she's holding his hand in front of Spencer, she's flirting with him, she's saying stuff to Spencer like, yeah, well, I trust Caleb. And it really taints the friendship between Hanna and Spencer, because it's like they're competing over Caleb rather than staying true to each other first and foremost. The one thing I will say is the barn scene was a really good scene, because you see Caleb on one side of the door trying to talk to Spencer, saying, please Spencer, take me back, I feel terrible. And Hannah's there crying, and so everyone's just really emotional, and Spencer won't open the door for Caleb, but he's trying to talk to her about how much he cares about her and he loves her. But then soon after that, he suddenly realizes that he loves Hanna. So did all the words that he just said to Spencer mean nothing? And it undermines again that whole barn scene, because it didn't really go anywhere, because then he goes back to Hanna. So that makes Caleb now candidate number 3. Look, also incredibly douchey and unlikable, especially him. I think he looked the worst of all. He looked so mean, especially because if he'd gone into dating Spencer thinking this is the girl of my dreams, then fine. But all he really had to say about her was she was smart and fun and sexy as hell, and that's about it. And she says I love you and she's on board, but he's not. So it's like, dude, if you're not really 100% on board with this, why are you dating Spencer? Because you know how that's going to affect Hanna by you doing that. So he cheated on Spencer, which is a douchey move, obviously. But then he was acting like it was her fault. She'd make a suggestion about something. He'd be like, no, Spencer, and hang up on her and just be super cold, because after he breaks up with Spencer, he's annoyed at Hanna for a bunch of things. But then he says, you won't admit that we're meant to spend the rest of our lives together. Which made it seem, again, so douchey, because how on earth is Hanna meant to know whether you're meant to spend the rest of your lives together? Because she was so confused for like a whole season about whether or not you two were on or off. So it was so dumb too, because he had also been in denial about the fact they were meant to be together, because a few episodes ago, he was begging Spencer to take him back. I've explained. I'll link them down below in my previous video essays about Emily and Aria, how sometimes with their storylines they had the worst ones, because it's like relationships, that's all you do apparently, that's all women are here on this earth to do, is to date and make babies. Especially Emily, because her relationships were all over the place, and it's like the writers were trying too hard to be inclusive. Like her relationships were a token to seem diverse, whereas with Hanna it's like she actually had stuff to do a lot of the time. She had really compelling storylines, even though they don't go far enough. You can sort of see the potential there. So Hannah's threatened by A over her ED, her mum's stealing money, she's threatened by Wilden, Mona betrays her. In like season 7, Hanna is mad about the game because she feels like she's having a really hard time and A is putting all this pressure on her, but A isn't being as harsh on people like Aria, which I do get because that would be super frustrating. And obviously she was the one that hit Archer with the car, so it's like another level of pressure because she's the one that in the end is going to be in the most trouble because she was driving the car. So one of the messages the show sends is that, I was hoping I could rest my hand, but it just goes down, is that skinny means that you're popular, and that's what happens. Like if you lose weight, it will be different. You'll be treated different, you'll get the guy, you'll feel different, you'll be happy, and often that's not the case. She didn't actually get any proper help or treatment from, a doctor, a professional. She just did her own methods of losing weight and getting over it, and then she just gets over it. She feels almost earlier like she owes Mona something, like Mona made her who she is, because earlier she was just photoshopping her body and stuff, but then Mona is doing her hair, making her look pretty. Hanna probably thought, yeah, this is me, coming into myself, I know who I am, this is who I am, this is the new me. But then later on, I think it's around season 5, she realizes that Mona was basically making her the twin or doppelganger of Allison, because Mona had this obsession with Allison, so she wanted a project to turn into Allison. So I don't know about you guys, but I would find that extremely disturbing if I thought, no, this is me, this is my style, this is my appearance, this is all me, this is my new look and my new attitude, and then you find out years down the line that actually the person who helped you with that was actually trying to make you look and feel like someone else, because you'd have an identity crisis and be like, well, who am I then? I'm just trying to be Allison again, and it would suck. But there's not much development around that, around her talking to Mona, like, what's going on? Why did you do that to me? It's just very skimmed over. Especially when you see what they eat on the show. I remember one scene where Spencer was making a smoothie and they're having those really gross school lunches, like the pasta and the sandwiches and stuff. Outside of that, you barely ever see the girls eating, or they'll have food next to them, but they won't actually be eating it. And if they do, often it's very small portions and it's just a salad. Hanna went through so much to get to this queen bee status, and I would have loved more behind the scenes details about if it was actually worth it. Was it what she thought it would be like? Because the grass is always greener on the other side. Maybe she realized being popular wasn't as fun as she thought it would be, and I thought there'd be more development around that, around her self-worth and stuff, because I remember Mona even said, do you know how hard I have to work to get a guy like Noel Khan to go out with me? Something so many people can relate to, I think. Why am I not good enough? And her stealing was another topic that was not treated well enough. For me, when I watched it, I thought that would be a problem in later seasons too. I thought it was a manifestation of something else, because whenever she stole, she seemed to do it when she was feeling terrible, like when Allison came back, or when she needed to get a sense of an ego boost. She had stealing, she had alcohol, she has shopping, she has food. One time she gets back after her traumatic experience from the dollhouse and she starts wanting to redecorate her room and she's ripping down the wallpaper. Yet none of that is really tied together. No patterns or constellations are drawn out of that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is Hanna and Mona's relationship. Their relationship is one of the reasons why Hanna is such a unique and interesting character on the show, and why she cares for Mona and actually sees the humanity and the depth in Mona, which is so nice, because the other girls really dehumanized Mona, I think, and forgot that she's an actual person. And actually, it's a shame, because the A reveal was a really big opportunity for Hanna's character to shine, the first A reveal, because it would have been so cool if Mona was the one to reveal herself as A to Hanna, right? Or trusted her enough to tell her that in some weird, twisted way. And in a flashback, Hanna holds onto Henry James's book Terminations. Hanna says the book is more of a Spencer Hastings type book. And Mona tells her, no, you're smarter than Spencer Hastings. And Hanna says, no, I'm not. And Mona's like, you are just as smart as Spencer. You just pretend you aren't. But that's just another way to hide. And then says Hanna doesn't have to hide from anyone anymore. I always felt like Mona was trying to hint at something deeper there. Or I thought at least there'd be a storyline of Hanna joining Mona's side on the A-team. Their relationship, though, as endearing as it was all over the place. Like, it was so bad. Sometimes Hanna would agree with the girls in this collective belief, yes, Mona's dangerous and I don't want anything to do with her, we'll stay away from her. But then at other points they'd be like, no, we'll use Mona when we need her and drag her into our mess we've created and then drop her to the curb when we've gotten her help, basically. Other times Hanna seems to really want to defend Mona and stand up for her. So it's like the writers forgot that they have this genuinely special bond and relationship and that they relate to each other in a unique way, because then suddenly the writers would remember, oh right, yeah, they have this connection. And then suddenly Hanna would be letting Mona stay with her and defending her against all odds. So it's like, where is this going? Erica said, to me, one of Hanna's lowest moments was when she insisted Mona helped them with the board game, and that turned out to be one of my favorite dialogues in the entire show, because I loved how they showed Hanna didn't have much awareness of how serious Mona's issues were and how clear Mona was when she explained, I'm not healthy. Hanna was presenting a trigger to Mona. Mona should not be involved in the board game stuff, the A stuff, because it's genuinely dangerous and toxic for her, because it's like an addiction. She doesn't want to get pulled back into it. Showing Mona something like that could make Mona relapse without even knowing it. However, I will say in the finale, Hanna says she's letting Mona stay at the loft because she feels responsible for Mona's well-being and she feels bad for making Mona go through with that whole board game thing. She has some awareness compared to the other girls. And even in the finale, I was like, so where are they going with this? How will they move forward in terms of their relationships? Are they friends? Are they not friends? And it's actually really useful for me to rewatch the show because I noticed a whole lot of stuff you just don't always notice on the first watch. And that's why I try and give specific examples in my videos, because I worry that otherwise, when you guys listen to me make judgments about stuff, you're going to be like, no, I disagree, because you might not actually remember all the stuff that happens because you've only seen the show once. And also, when you only watch the show once, there's only so much you can actually observe because you're kind of in autopilot mode the first time you're watching it. I'm not saying I hate Hanna's character, but I just found her really unlikable in season 7. But to be fair, all the characters kind of went downhill in season 7. She's not the only one. And also, I talked about revenge as well recently, so you can check that out. And yeah, just remember to subscribe, click the notification bell, and then all, so you get all notifications so you never miss another video from me. Oh my god, I completely forgot to mention, thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. I'm gonna do a 10,000 subscriber special. I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. You can let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions, maybe like a tea party or something, or I don't even know, just something really cute. But I'm just so grateful. I feel so lucky. And okay, so I'm not sure why my outro cut out, but these things happen. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow me on Instagram. Stay tuned for my Spencer deep dive, and I will see you next time. I love you guys so much. See you soon.